A Better Place by Andy Close. Cheng hurried down the alleyway, Sayana close behind him. The air of Low Hive was blood-warm and close. It conspired with drifting fumes to stifle each breath as he pulled it in and turn each exhalation into a damp wheeze. The alley that ran downhill between the flanks of two colossal processor shrines, with long neglected arc lumen fizzing and faltering upon their upper levels. Little of that light reached down to the alleyway. As he followed its steep plunge into the darkness, Cheng felt as though he was leading Sayana down into some kind of Stygian underworld. The Emperor can't see us down here, he thought, but he couldn't decide whether the notion was comforting or terrifying. "How much further?" asked Sayana in a whisper. "You don't need to ask me, do you?" he replied, keeping his voice low and picking his way around a toppled heap of metal crates. "Cheng," she started reproachfully. "It's true though, isn't it? You're better than that, see ya?" he pressed. "Better than all of them." Her hand fell on his shoulder, turning him gently but firmly to face her. She stood with the faint light of the processors at her back. Her frightened features were lost amidst the gloom of deeper shadows ahead. "Cheng, we've spoken of this. What we can do. What's happened to us?" "Sire, it's not a gift." Cheng recoiled at her sudden fury, though she still managed to keep her voice at a strangled hiss. In the low hives of Teshlor, catching the arbitrator's attention was an instinct learned from birth. "What's that?" he asked. "Sire, you can read thoughts. Who can lie to you? It's who can trick or misuse you anymore." "It's unnatural," Sayana said, haunted. She wrung her hands together. "It's witchcraft, sin. It's heresy, Cheng, and so is—" "What can I do?" he finished for her, his tone sour. "Can't bring yourself to say it, can you?" "We don't know why this has happened to us," she said. Her eyes were wide and glinting in the gloom, pleading with him to understand. "The Church says that curses like this are marks of heresy, of demons. We should be praying for forgiveness. We should be going to a priest, not this." "Demons, priests," scoffed Cheng. "Children's tales and their peddlers. You know what our fate would be. They'd have a nice warm pyre all ready for us in Penitence Square, just like Renge and Jacob." "Renge was mad," said Sayana, in a small haunted voice. "And Jacob?" Cheng demanded. She shook her head. "He went to the priests in good faith and they burned him," said Cheng, and found as he did so that the anger and horror of that awful day was still raw. Sayana was about to reply when they heard a dull clang from somewhere above. Echoes reverberated along the alleyway. They looked at each other in fright, both thinking the same thing. Out after curfew. No papers for this level. Cheng and Sayana clutched each other's arms in the shadows. They stared at one another like prey, frightened into paralysis. Cheng's heart thumped against his ribs. Despite himself, he reached for the power that had blossomed in his mind over the last few months. He felt it, a warm, somehow cloying stirring, somewhere between his mind and soul. He tried to marshal it, ready it, as he might perform the arming ritual for a stub gun. It slithered away as though it had a life of its own, and in his mind he reached for it with increasing desperation. Cheng's skin prickled with heat as though he stood near an open furnace. He tasted the coppery tang of blood. "Nothing," said Sayana, snapping him out of his reverie. Cheng abandoned his attempt to corral his newfound abilities, though he still felt the tingle as the coiling thing subsided. "Look, sire, you wanted to do this as much as me. The message said that if we want the Saviour to take us to the better place, it's this or nothing. Tonight, the sump pipes between Processor Shrines 9 and 10. I did, she whispered, hesitantly. I do, but what if it's wrong? What if they should burn us? We're witches, Cheng. We're not witches, he said firmly. This isn't our fault. We didn't do this on purpose, but it isn't going away. And if we stay here, then they'll find us out and kill us. I don't want to die for something that isn't my doing, sire. I don't want you to either. They stood for a moment, frozen in tableau, staring at one another. Then she nodded. Let's move quickly then, before they really do find us. They hurried on down the alleyway until they were feeling their way through near total darkness. Only a thin strip of grey light remained above them now, distant and dim. Things rustled and shifted in the darkness, questing insectile scuffs and clicks that Cheng didn't like at all. Just as he was beginning to fear that they may end the night being devoured by duct roaches, Cheng caught sight of a crimson glow emanating from the floor ahead. He hastened towards it and saw that it was an eye, 3 feet across, painted in red biolume pigment. The eye glowed balefully next to a sump cover that had been left askew. Here, he whispered, help me. The two of them got their fingers under the metal of the sump cover and dragged it aside. The scrape of metal on stone seemed deafening. You first, said Sayana. Now, go, Cheng replied, reaching again for his hidden gift as the clicking and rustling continued. She squeezed past him, finding the barely visible rungs of the ladder below and scrambling hurriedly down. Cheng followed her, pulling the cover back into place as he went. The sound of the solid clank of metal settling into place filled him with relief. It was short-lived. Cheng, came Sayana's wary voice from below. He heard movement in the dark, the distinctive racking of a shotgun slide. The image of the Arbites filled his mind, waiting in this pipe to ambush muties. Calm down, lad. Slow and steady, came a smoke-roughened voice. Cheng relaxed a little. That wasn't the vox-amplified boom of an arbiter. He climbed down as quickly as he could, by feel alone, and pressed himself in next to Sayana. He could sense people around them, smell the sweat of them, hear their breathing. Who are you? He demanded, trying to keep the curious tone out of his voice. And where is the Saviour? There came a mechanical humming. A weird crawling sensation caressed Chen's skin, raising goosebumps. He felt the coiled thing twitch within him, then subside. Psycolum's red, came a voice. Their psych is all right, both of them. Marvellous, came the first rough voice again. Cheng was forced to throw up his hands to shield his face as light blossomed in the pipe. Blinking furiously, eyes watering, he made out 3 human shapes packed into the cramped tunnel around them. Each had a stab light on their left shoulder. All had now activated them, pinning him and Sayana in a pool of light. Where's the Saviour? He asked again. He reached for his power without conscious thought. As he did so, a device held by one of the figures gave a warning chime. Oh no need for that, said the rough-voiced man, angling his stab light away from them. Cheng made out scarred and rugged features and the frayed remains of a uniform. Planetary militer, maybe? He saw that the man had only his left eye. The right was a scarred pit. We'll have to check everyone who comes into the Saviour's sanctum, said the man, pointing his shotgun away from Cheng and Sayana to show that he meant no harm. You know what the RBs are like. Wouldn't put it past them to try something sneaky. We're not arbitrators, said Sayana. We just want to get off this world. We just want to go to the better place. And so you shall, said the man with rough cheer. He turned to the other 2 figures. Stay on guard. If they show themselves, you know what to do. Cheng saw a man and a woman, another 2 war-weathered military deserters by the looks of them, also only boasting their left eyes. Come on. Saviour's waited long enough, said the man, turning and leading the way along the cramped pipe. Cheng had to duck as they made their way along, the scuffs and clangs of their progress rendered dull in the stifling air. He quickly found himself wrestling with claustrophobia as the pipe seemed to go on and on. "Nearly there," said the man, as though recognizing Chen's panic. Perhaps he can sense it, Cheng thought. Perhaps that's why he's here too. To Cheng's relief, they emerged at last into a much larger space, perhaps a pumping chamber, or undersump. Whatever it once had been, the place had been drained and repurposed to become a kind of shrine. Candles burned everywhere with a crimson glow. Crabbed runic characters were scrawled across the walls and ceiling, glowing with the same biolume pigment as Cheng had seen outside. There were several dozen people already crammed into the chamber. They turned to look at Cheng and Sayana as their guide brought them in. He saw other labourers and shrine hands here, but to his surprise there were also clerks, minor acolytes, fungus farmers, and one person he could have sworn was some young uphiver lordling, hidden under a heavy cloak. Above them stood a raised platform surrounded by candles. And there was the Saviour. It had to be him, Cheng thought. He took in the man's flowing blue robes, the golden torque around his neck, and the faintly glowing amulet against his chest. The man's face was seamed and kindly, with a close-cropped white beard. Like his guards, Cheng saw the Saviour only had one eye. "Welcome, lost ones," said the Saviour as they entered. His voice was warm and deep, reassuring, yet somehow powerful. "Congratulations, you have found the first step upon the path. Rest assured that the first step is the hardest. From here onwards, the light of the Crimson King shall be your beacon." Cheng went to speak, perhaps to say some words of thanks or to ask a question. The hard, impatient stares of the others gathered there choked the words off in his throat. Instead, he followed Sayana to a place at the back of the gathering. As the Saviour spoke on, his hand found hers. "You have been told that you are heretics," said the Saviour, and in his voice there was anger and sorrow. "Not at us," Cheng thought with a surge of relief. "On our behalf." "You have been told that what you can do, the powers you have developed, are evil. You have hidden your gifts, lurked like criminals cowered in the shadows, like unclean things from the very authorities who should have embraced you for the miraculous beings you are." Murmuring filled the chamber, angry oaths, and words of outraged agreement. "You are not monsters, my friends," the Saviour continued. He offered them a benevolent smile. "You are ascendant beings. You are superior in every way to the grubbing herd of humanity. That's why the priests call you witch. That's why they hunt you, persecute you, burn you." More angry voices now. "Bastards! They burned Quelwyn, and he did nothing wrong. What gives them the right?" The Saviour raised his hand to quiet them. "Indeed, they persecute you because you are strong, because your strength exposes just how weak they are. But fear not, beloved friends. There is one who knows your true value. The Crimson King knows you. The Crimson King sees you, sees the future of this benighted race. The Emperor and all his servants would burn you in the fires of ignorance, but the Crimson King will raise you into the light of true knowledge. Do you wish this?" "Yes," came several voices. "Then it shall be yours," said the Saviour. "Tonight we travel through these tunnels to a secret, sacred place. From there we take ship off-world to begin a pilgrimage of many months. I cannot lie to you. Not all shall survive its rigours, but for those who do, the better place awaits, the realm of the Crimson King, a chance to become part of his grand and wondrous designs." Cheng felt Sayana squeeze his hand. She smiled at him, and it almost broke his heart to see the hope in her eyes. He felt the thing inside him coil and stir, and he pushed it back down with effort. We're getting out of this damned place, he thought, trepidation and hope warring within him. In but a moment we shall be on our way, for time is not our ally, said the saviour, and with that he drew a long golden-bladed dagger from his belt. He tapped it significantly against the side of his skull, next to where his right eye had been. But first, my friends, there is a toll, proof of your devotion and of your strength. We will bear you to the realm of the Crimson King, but all must pay the ferryman. Chang felt fear at the words, felt the anxious stirrings of the crowd around him, and heard the muttering turn angry. He was about to pull his hand from Cyana's and raise his voice in protest, but her look stopped him, sad but determined, loaded with a certainty he had never seen in her before. We have to suffer for this, Chang, she said. It's only right. With that, she took her hand from his. He watched powerless as Cyana pushed her way to the front of the crowd. I will pay the toll, she said. The saviour smiled in answer.